Welcome to Life Happens, where Texans come to protect their legacy and prepare for the second half of life. Join your host, attorney Kim Hegwood of Your Legacy Legal Care, and our weekly guest as we navigate the challenges that emerge as life happens. Now here's your host, Kim Hegwood.
Good morning and welcome to Life Happens with me, Kim Hegwood, and our very special guest today is Dr. Christopher Fagundes. Good morning.
Hey, thanks for having me. How are you?
I'm doing well, and I'm super excited to have you on. And so you have a company called Project Reach. And so we're going to find out about what the real-time caregiver data is teaching us about dementia support, because I think that's really cool. And so I'm super excited to have you on today. And so let's kind of run into things or just kind of hit the ground running, so to speak. And so Project Reach is one of the first U.S. studies to track caregiver stress in real time using wearables and daily smartphone surveys. I know I have my smart stuff, so I can appreciate that. So, what motivated the research team to move beyond traditional "How did you feel last week" interviews?
Yeah, no, it's a really good question. Thanks for having me again. So, we were interested before in this idea that chronic stress of caregiving, especially with dementia spousal caregivers, it was in fact impacting sort of multiple systems in the body in fundamental ways, from the cardiovascular to the immune system. And we would accompany that with assessments of not daily stress, but sort of over the past 2 weeks, how did you feel? And as we were talking to more and more caregivers, what they would say as they're answering it, well, it depends. Do you mean right now? Do you mean 3 days ago? The caregiving experience, it's all about sort of these in the moment changes. One moment you feel like you have things together, and the next moment something hits you differently. And that made me think to myself, we're getting this technology on that's able to, in real time, like never before, be able to actually assess people in those moments, both in terms of sort of reporting on the smartphone, but also all these sensor devices. And that made us think more and more, if we're really going to capture and do some good in this population, we really need to understand first what is happening in those moments, and if the patterns in those moments are actually what sort of predicts these sort of long-term outcomes versus sort of this amalgamation over a 2-week period.
Well, I'm almost kind of glad I didn't have wearables when I was a caregiver, because I can only imagine the spikes, in my stuff. Because I took care of my grandparents, and so so I was in charge of a lot, and then I had teenagers, and I was still working full time. So my stress level was really, really high at that point in time.
Sure.
But I had the best grandparents in the world, so I'm not complaining by any stretch of the imagination. So they were wonderful people. So,
Wow.
but let's talk about a caregiver. So you talk about Kenneth Payne, and he describes his loneliness and the emotional weight of supporting a spouse with dementia. So how did that real-time data help researchers understand and eventually reduce that daily strain?
Yeah. So for many caregivers, what we found, and we're not the first people to find this, is that in addition to all the stress they feel, they become extremely isolated, right? Because the idea that they're in the home a lot of times, not within their social network. In addition to not being in their social network, they're focused on this sort of one issue a lot. This is especially the case when it comes to dementia caregivers. On top of that, some caregivers almost feel a bit of shame or not wanting to sort of reach out and invite friends over like they have in the past. So what we found is, by having people report this on mobile devices one way or the other, and also trying to connect to their physiology, what we can do then is create prompts in real time, just that encouragement, for example, when they're feeling this, to reach out, providing suggestions. It might seem like a little thing, but in the moment when you're so stressed, your world narrows so much. And getting those sort of encouragements in the moment seems to actually facilitate people to reach out and do whatever it is that it's able to have them connect with the outside world. So that's one sort of major aspect of our current work, is actually figuring out how to solve this loneliness problem that we see in caregivers, because they're stressed, but at the same time, quite lonely and isolated, especially as dementia progresses.
We talk to clients a lot when they're in my office, and this one gentleman comes to mind because he's in my office and his wife had dementia. And I said, "What do you do for fun?" He goes, "What?"
Mhm.
I said, "What do you do for fun?" He goes, "I just take care of my wife." And I said, "Well, do you have hobbies?" He says, "No, I worked and then, then she got sick, so I'm taking care of her." I said, "But what would you like to do if you had time?" And so we had to go into that conversation, trying to get him, I think he wanted to take music lessons or something. I said, "I
Uh-huh.
know a guy. So, here's a number, sign up for for some lessons, I'm like, because you have to do that. You got to keep steady. So yeah, so I can appreciate what you talking to the people you do, because I see them in my office all the time. But the
Yeah, I'm
study,
sure.
but the study combines heart monitor data, daily mood, sleep surveys, and biomarkers of inflammation. What have you learned so far about caregiving stress, how it affects the body as well as the mind?
Yeah, so we've known for quite some time now, our work has shown this, but also work before, that on average, caregivers, it seems to have an assault on their immune system, assault on the cardiovascular system. But we're finding more and more, there's a lot of variability actually within the caregiver population. So instead of showing, for example, these differences of, oh, caregiver bad for your health versus not, what we've been trying to do more and more is say, okay, what is it that makes some caregivers quite thrive quite well, and others, have harder time, right? And that's sort of been a focus of the work. Now, when it comes to our study at hand, what we found is, like I said, loneliness is a major factor. This feeling of loneliness and feeling social isolation. But unlike in our sort of prior, more crude work, we asked people over the last month, how lonely do you feel? By assessing in the moment, what we actually found, it's not just people's sort of levels of loneliness that seem to be very predictive of their physical health and somewhat their sort of long-term mental health. When I'm talking about sort of major depression, it's the patterns of oscillation. So people that, for example, feel really, really lonely at 12 o'clock in the afternoon, and then it drops to feeling actually maybe a baseline, and then really spike, and you have this oscillation constantly. Those are actually the individuals that seem to have the worst physical health outcomes, and to a certain extent long-term mental health outcomes, over people that you would ask this crude, how kind of how lonely you are. What was interesting about that is, even when you just look at people's sort of average levels of loneliness, it doesn't seem to be as prognostic long-term outcomes as if people vary quite a bit. And we're trying to understand why that's the case, what that does to the body differently.
So I'm like, I need one of those apps. So I was just thinking. And so many caregivers can't leave their loved ones to participate in research. Yet, it looks like your company, Project Reach, offers home visits. How has this approach changed who you can participate and what you're able to learn?
Oh, it really has been, a game changer in the sense of being able to get a representative population of everyone in the Houston area, or our studies in the Houston area, versus those that maybe have a lot of resources, right? Where they're able to, for example, have people come to their house all the time to help, and they're able to get out. We're able to reach people that are kind of what you could consider more isolated. We're also able just to kind of be able to reach people in a more sort of broad demographic way. So I'm at Rice and the Texas Medical Center. Getting into the Texas Medical Center in and of itself can be a challenge for anyone. Now, when you have a caregiver, when you're a caregiver of someone with dementia, even if they come into our laboratory and have someone to spend time with them while they do their assessments, the challenge is so great. So being able to go to their place of residence, has really been able to expand our reach, and it's been quite appreciated, if you will. And it's interesting, the work I've done before on spousal bereavement, when people were given the option, they actually wanted to come into the lab, and it makes sense, right? Getting out of your environment. But at this period of time, it's very difficult to do. And that also echoes sort of the point of the study broadly, right? We're trying to have people in their home environment get these interventions instead of having to go out into, the community.
Do you think it helps that to really get good data when you can see them in their home environment?
So that's a really good question. So the idea, do people answer the questions every way? Are there physiological assessments even the same thing when they have to go into this foreign place, right? I think there's no empirical work that I know that systematically shows in our field that you're getting more quote unquote accurate data. But heuristically, when you talk to the people in our studies, they definitely feel more comfortable in their home environment. But the other thing that also really impacts not the quality of data, but also just the overall experience is the staff members that are coming to their place and the warmness that they are able to convey and how they're able to interact with these participants. That seems to actually probably drive more in terms of sort of just being satisfied about the experience. So short answer, I would think so, but I don't know any good data in our world that shows, we see these differences that are fundamental.
I was just curious. So
It's a good question. I could see a major paper in the future where they're trying to actually work that out, right?
And so real-time stress patterns eventually shape personalized interventions for caregivers. So what kind of supports or tools do you envision emerging from this research in the next few years?
Yeah, well, I think it depends if we're talking about our mental health or our physical health. I think on the mental health side, the more we're able to get sort of these fine-grained information about the context that the caregiver is in, the better able that you can imagine in a 5-year period of time, that information is going to a clinician in a way where they can utilize it to get sort of just a really good picture of what these individuals are experiencing to more tailor care. In the world of psychology, we know for a long time there has been sort of wars about this approach to treatment versus that. And I think more or less we've settled on this idea that, well, it really depends on who in the context they're in. And being able to get more of this information, I think that's going to be able to tailor treatments on that side. As far as our physical, health goes, I think that being able to get sort of fine-grained assessments in people's home environments, they're going to be able to kind of better have this information available to medical health professionals that are going to know, for example, if I go in the clinic and my blood pressure is 160 over 110, is that because I'm in the clinic and I'm highly stressed going in here and it's a foreign environment, or is it the case that I continuously have high blood pressure? Being able to have these sort of ambulatory assessments, you're able to parse that apart, which I think will also impact more personalized and better treatments.
So Project Reach runs through 2028 and continues to gather that moment by moment data. So what are the biggest unanswered questions you hope this study will solve for families living with dementia?
Yeah. So the biggest thing we're trying to do is work actually now with our engineering colleagues to see if we can look at patterns in this data to more accurately know when to intervene in the moment. I use that sort of that example of intervening with how lonely individuals are, but that's one of many different things. So what we're hoping to do is kind of our next step is to utilize this information, work with our engineering colleagues that are doing all these kind of amazing machine learning and artificial intelligence models to be able to utilize that data and know exactly when and what people need and how best to deliver it to them. So I think it's going to take a multidisciplinary approach that isn't going to just take people like me that work in the world of biology and psychology, but also reaching out to our engineers who are highly motivated and excited about this. I'll say I've worked with many in the digital health space, and the idea of utilizing these data with their sort of skills is exciting for both parties.
So let me ask you one last question before I let you go. So, when someone, you can see based on the wearables and things like that, that somebody's in stress.
Mm-hmm.
Are you able to have them pinpoint exactly what the stressor is at the time?
That's a really good question. So what we do now is you have these assessments where you see these deviations, and then you get a ping on one's smartphone, and you're able to inquire upon those questions, basically, so you can link the two together. You also get questions, and you have to do it really quickly because they're under stress, right? And sometimes they answer it right afterward, of course, and not during the moment. But also ask, like, okay, what was the context where you're in, right? Are people around you right now? Do you have someone here? Are you really isolated? So we're able to get at not just like the moment that it happens, but sort of what is happening around you that's driving that for you. And as and a lot of people, when they think about it, have experienced what happens to me that causes sort of a disruption psychologically might be different than what happens to you. I'm triggered by different things. I have different life experiences dating back to childhood, right? And so being able to kind of personalize that within the individual, I think, is critical, because let's face it, not everyone is impacted in the same way by the same things.
Yeah, that's true. And so, well, this has been wonderful. So, so how do people find you?
Yeah, so there's a couple ways you can reach out, either by phone or by email. My email address is cf20@rice.edu, and my project coordinator that really does a lot of this work, email address is pm22@rice.edu. My phone number is 713-348-2468. And reach out for anything related to the study with that phone number. If you would like to just reach me personally for any reason in my office, it is 713-348-8126. And our website is bmed.rice.edu. So once again, it's bmed, like B as in boy, M as in mom, ed.rice.edu.
Perfect. And so thanks so much, Dr. Fagundes, for being on today. And I look forward to having you on in 2028 to get some update.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for inviting me. Really enjoyed the conversation.
Thanks so much. You take care.
You too. Bye.
Thanks for tuning in to this week's episode of Life Happens with Kim Hegwood. Be sure to tune in every Thursday at 10 a.m. wherever you listen to your podcast as we navigate through the challenges that emerge as life happens. The content of this podcast does not establish an attorney-client relationship or constitute attorney-client privilege, legal, medical, financial, or any other professional advice.